I came home from work with a heavy head and shoulders marking the weight of the day, and the first thing I saw was my clothes flying around the yard as a flag of defeat on a windy day. The lawn was uneven, a part of the automatic sprinkler was still wet, and my blisses hit the ground and stuck to the grass as if to apologize for being dirty. The back door was left ajar, and the smell of the house, stale coffee, and the sweet perfume I don't wear told me that she had been there for a long time. I stopped in the middle of the porch, looked at each piece scattered around, and heard the laughter. It wasn't just laughter. It was that satisfied laugh of someone who thinks he won a trophy for humiliating, and the owner of that laugh was leaning against the kitchen frame, arms crossed, looking at me as if evaluating a job poorly done. "Now the backyard suits you," she said, and turned her face to the side as if dismissing a bad ad on TV. I took a deep breath, once, twice, 3 times. I felt the wood of the balcony creak under my sneakers, and I told them in my mind, first pick up the white piece, then the pants, then the favorite blue coat. I didn't answer. Alia Carter, 27 years old, married to Marcus for 3 years, living on the outskirts of Atlanta, a neighborhood of houses with balconies and decorated trees on Halloween. I could have screamed. She could have remembered that that house is not hers. But from the beginning, I decided to win in my own way. In silence, one decision at a time, like someone who closes doors without knocking. So I went down the steps, picked up my white t-shirt from the ground, calmly shook the grass and put it on my arm, bending as if nothing had happened. She gave another laugh. Look at that, the maid picking up her own mess. It wasn't a mess. She knew that. Since the first month of marriage, Dolores treated my presence like a stain in the new sofa. It started with the quick visits, always without warning. Then came the copied key. I found out because she herself commented, "Marcus gave it to me years ago." And I knew from the look in his eyes that it was a lie. The phrases came, "Your food doesn't taste like family food. This wall color is not for clean people. Your hair, better not to comment." I swallowed. For him. Because Marcus is a correct, hard-working man. He grew up with her alone in 2 jobs and a hard head. I understood loyalty. He did not accept the invasion. And there I was, collecting my clothes in the middle of the yard, the afternoon light cutting through the fence and drawing shadows on my arms, when I saw the discreet dot in the corner of the balcony eaves, the camera that Marcus installed after we found my drawer turned over, and she swore that it must have been the wind. That camera had a perfect angle of the back door, the laundry room hallway, and half of the yard. I didn't look at her. I just kept putting it together, piece by piece, like someone who collects evidence in silence. Dolores approached, stomping hard, and lightly kicked my sweater into the mud. "This one doesn't deserve to go back to the closet." I took it from the clay without haste, knocked it lightly, and said for the first time, "Is it over?" She arched her eyebrow. "Is it over?" "I'm the one who decides when it's over, dear." At my son's house, I decide. The word dear, the way she spoke, always came with thorns. I looked up and held it for 2 seconds, firm. Then I folded my sweater again as if finishing a simple job. And I took my cell phone. Not to call. I knew that Marcus was on his way by this time, and that the camera motion notifications had already told half the story. I just opened the screen, marked the time on the clock, and sent a short message. "I'm here. It's okay." Because it was. Even though nothing seemed to be, I refused to give her the scene she wanted. The open fight, the scandal, the neighbor of the blue house recording through the window. I walked in with the pieces in my arms, each one landing on the laundry countertop. The smell of fabric softener gave me a little bit of calm. Dolores came behind, invading the corridor as if it were rightfully hers. "You don't know your place," she said, looking the house up and down. And I thought about the times she stirred my pots and said that Real Housewives keep things somewhere else. The times she saw my coat on the back of the chair and took it off saying, "A chair is not a hanger." The time she left passive-aggressive notes, "Trash must be taken out every day," with a heart drawn at the end. It thought about all this and responded with the laundry room door closing slowly, without slamming, just enough for her to understand that that limit now existed. I stood there for a few seconds, feeling the heartbeat slow down. I looked once more at the corner of the window and imagined Marcus watching it on his phone, his face becoming serious and silent as it always is when something crosses the line. He hates fighting. He does not tolerate injustice. I know him. His car entered the garage without a horn, without an announcement. Dolores went back to the kitchen, straightened her blouse, tried to look neutral. I stood with my hands resting on the countertop, with my back to the door, listening to the doorknob turn, his footsteps on the vinyl floor. The air changed. I can't explain it better, but it has changed. It's the kind of presence that a house recognizes when someone in charge arrives willing to put things in their place. I breathed, counted to 3, and turned around. Marcus looked at me first. Didn't ask anything. Just looked at the clothes, the mud in the sweater, the closed door of the laundry room. Then he looked at his mother. "We need to talk," he said, in a tone that didn't have to be loud. And for the first time in a long time, I saw in Dolores's eyes something that wasn't contempt. It was fear of losing control. I didn't say anything. I didn't even need to. I had already won the moment I didn't give her the show she wanted. The rest, I knew, would be resolved as it should be, with facts, with their courting, with the weight of a decision made in silence and said in a firm voice, in the way that hurts the most in those who have never learned to respect. When Marcus said he needed to talk, the entire kitchen seemed to hold their breath. Dolores crossed her arms, trying to regain that posture of someone who is in charge of everything. I was silent, watching. He didn't get close to his mother first. He walked up to me. He looked at me if I was okay. And that was enough. His voice didn't tremble. Ash said, "Mom, why were her clothes in the yard?" Dolores laughed, but it was another laugh now, nervous, forced, as if trying to break the mood because she realized she lost control of the narrative. "Oh, it was just a joke. This girl needs to learn not to leave clothes lying around." I felt the air pull my chest forward as if my body wanted to respond on impulse, but I held on. Marcus took a deep breath, took his phone out of his pocket, and without taking his eyes off her, opened the camera app. He put the video right in front of her face, every piece being thrown out, the laugh of satisfaction, the kick in my favorite sweater. I watched Dolores's expression change second by second, as if she had completely forgotten that cameras exist in 2025. She tried to speak, choked on her own justification, stumbled over excuses that didn't fit. Marcus was direct. "This will not happen again. You don't enter here without authorization anymore." His words fell like doors closing from within. Dolores took a deep breath, pursing her lip. She still tried to make up ground. "Marcus, I'm your mother." He did not raise his voice, but the firmness of the speech made more noise than shouting. "And she's my wife, and this ice our home." The silence after these sentences weighed as absolute truth. Marcus picked up my still folded clothes and placed them carefully on the table. I felt a strange warmth in my chest, a relief that came mixed with sadness for the times I had to shut up to prevent him from being between two pains. He ran his hand on my shoulder in a gesture that said more than words. "I saw everything. I'm here." Dolores changed her strategy. He tried to victimize himself, said that I poisoned their relationship, that since I arrived, he has distanced himself from the real family. I stood still, staring at the ground, trying not to let the anger turn into words I might regret later. Marcus did not fall into the trap. "You crossed the line. I will no longer allow this kind of behavior with the woman I love." That's when the phrase came that she thought would silence everything. "I raised you alone. You owe me." She said it with her finger raised, as if loving a child gave her the right to control his life forever. Marcus nodded slowly. "No, Mom. I am grateful. But debt does not justify abuse." Dolores didn't seem to believe what she heard. I realized that she was not used to being contradicted. She lived in a world where she thought love and control were the same thing. Marcus took a breath, looked at the front door and said calmly, "I think you better go home now. We talk later," calmly. She slammed her palm on the table, feeling betrayed. "Are you going to kick me out like that? Because of her?" He stood firm. "I'm protecting my family." Family. I felt that word enter me like a house that finally has an owner. Dolores tried one last emotional blow. "If you let her take you away from me, you'll regret it." It was half threat, half despair, and complete injustice. Marcus didn't answer. He just pointed to the door. I didn't celebrate. I didn't change the expression. I knew that fights like this don't end in a sentence. They are like cracks that take time to reveal how deep they already were. Dolores walked to the door, each step carrying a mixture of wounded pride and hatred guarded. Before leaving, she turned to me. He looked at my arms, at my clothes still with grass marks, and let out something low, almost a whisper, but clear enough to hurt. "You don't deserve him." I didn't answer, because the answer was already happening before her eyes. The son she raised was choosing me. She left, slamming the door, ignoring the doorbell that rang with the impact. When the sound disappeared, my breath went down to my stomach. Marcus came up to me and asked, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I breathed carefully. "Because I knew that if you saw it with your own eyes, nothing she said could distort the truth." He pulled me into a hug, and I let my body rest on his chest for a few seconds. It was strange to feel peace right after a storm. Marcus walked away, looked at me with a new seriousness. This ends today, I promise. I believed it. But something in the way Dolores closed the door told me that she wasn't going to accept defeat so easily. And deep down, I knew. People who love power can't stand losing control. And she still had plans to try to get hers back. Marcus suggested that we go outside to breathe a little, but I was still gathering the rest of the clothes when his cell phone vibrated. He looked at the screen and frowned. I didn't have to ask who it was. He swallowed hard before answering, turned a little to the side, but he could hear Dolores' voice on the other side. She cried, and it was not a cry of regret. It was a cry of manipulation. Son, you will miss me. You'll regret choosing this girl over your mother. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and replied calmly, Mom, I didn't choose one over the other. I chose what is right. She insisted, now accusing. She took you away from me. She wants everything that is hers. Marcus held his words so as not to get angry. I walked away because you don't respect our marriage. He did not raise his voice. But firmness cut through any argument she tried to invent. After that, it turned off, leaving only the sound of my heart in the air, which was still beating too fast. I hugged him and felt his heavy body, carrying the fatigue of years of trying to balance the love for his mother and the life he built with me. We sat on the couch. Marcus ran his hand through his hair, thinking about what to do next. She's going to try to come back, I said. He nodded. But this time, it won't go in. That was more than a promise. It was a structural change, a limit that never existed, now well-designed. Tomorrow, I'll change the locks, and no one but the two of us will have copies. I nodded, feeling the first real spark of security. We spent the rest of the evening talking about other things, trying to deflect the pain that still hung in the air. But even in the midst of trying to normalize, I couldn't fully relax. I didn't trust Dolores' silence. When someone loses the control they thought was guaranteed, they usually look for ways to recover quickly. I went to bed late, feeling my heart racing, afraid that she would come back at any moment. The next day, Marcus left the house early to get the job done, but first stopped by the hardware store to buy a new lock. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard the doorbell ring repeatedly, in a hurry, with force. I knew who it was. I took a breath, wiped my hands on the tea towel, and walked to the front door. I looked through the viewfinder. Dolores was standing on the porch, arms crossed, staring sharply, as if all night she had rehearsed the perfect attack. I opened the door just enough for her to understand that she wouldn't be greeted with a red carpet. "Did you think I was going to leave like that?" she asked. The voice was cold, very different from the attempt to cry on the phone. I stood firm. Marcus asked to talk later, calmly. She laughed, almost contemptuously. "I came to take something that belongs to me." I frowned, not understanding immediately. "The key to my son's house." She held out her open hand, demanding. I spent a few seconds staring at her hand outstretched in the air, as if that gesture summed up everything she had always believed, that she had the right, that it was enough to ask and receive, that I was just a temporary occupant in her son's life. I breathed. "The key was never yours?" She narrowed her eyes, took a step forward. "You're not going to take my son away from." Before I could answer, Marcus's car pulled into the garage. He left without turning off the engine. "Mom, I've already asked you. Go home. We'll talk later." She tried to put drama in her voice. "Do you want me to disappear from your life?" Marcus approached, stood next to me, and replied, "I want you to respect my wife." Dolores looked at the two of us and saw a wall. Not a wall against her, but a wall she could no longer cross. And then she uttered a phrase that never left my memory. "If she's going to take my son away from me, then I'm going to take her out of your life." Marcus stepped forward. "Don't talk to her like that." Dolores looked away, collected the little pride she still had, and marched off to her car. "You're going to regret it," was the last thing she said before slamming the door and speeding off the street. Marcus sighed as if he had held his breath for hours. "She's crossed all the line," he said, and he started changing the lock right away. I watched, feeling a mixture of security and apprehension, because when a person feels like they're losing everything, that's exactly when they get most dangerous. The house was now protected, but I knew she hadn't given up yet. Dolores does not accept losing. He never accepted. I just didn't imagine how far she would go to try to recover what she thought was hers. Marcus changed the lock that afternoon. I saw his every move through the reflection of the kitchen window, steady hands, determined eyes. When he finished, he held the new key between his fingers and looked at me with a mixture of relief and guilt. "Sorry for taking so long," he said. I shook my head, but inside me something rearranged itself. It wasn't revenge, it was relief to finally be able to close a door that always seemed to open. That night, just in case, we turned on the little alarm we had installed when we moved in and scheduled messages to let you know if the back door was opened. I slept with the feeling of being in a bubble, protected, but attentive. Days passed in apparent normality. Dolores did not appear at home again, but her absence had an equal weight to her presence. Every notification on my cell phone made me believe that something could happen at any moment. A week later, on a quiet morning when I was trying to organize the household bills, the mail brought a thick envelope with no sender. Minami was handwritten in a handwriting that looked old, as if it had come from another time. I opened it carefully. Inside, there were photos of me. Images stolen from simple moments. Me at the grocery store holding bags. Me at the laundry room folding clothes. Me fiddling with the cake I'd made for Marcus's birthday. In some photos, there was even the dirty sweater, the scene she had created, the missing vase in the cupboard, the recipe I had borrowed from a friend, all laid out as if every detail of my life were material for accusation. At the bottom of the package, a note. Do you think you can tack what's mine and get away with it? I signed the air and felt a chill that wasn't just fear. It was the clear feeling that the game had changed boards. Marcus entered the room when he saw me with the photos. His face hardened. "This is old," he said, pointing to the yellowed edges of the images, as if time gave authenticity to hatred. I shook my head. She could have picked it up in the trash or followed it with a camera. It doesn't matter where it comes from. What matters is that it is attacking. Marcus closed his hands into fists for a second and then breathed. I'm going to report it. I wanted to believe that this would solve it, but I had already learned that legal measures work slowly and do not always cover the sudden emotional blow that someone can deliver on a night of anger. At the same time, I realized that there was something more than just a grudge. There was a desire to expose and destroy my image, to turn me into a public figure of shame within the circle he cherished so much. Days later, a neighbor who always looked to the side discovered another note taped to the garage wall with cutting words about who really runs this family and insinuating things about my origin, about my family, little lies that grow like weeds if they are not pulled out of the core. Marcus went to the police station with the photos and the videotape of the camera, left there with the promise that they would make a record, and if they found evidence of persecution, they would take the appropriate measures. I tried to rest in this bureaucracy, but I couldn't help but think about the possibilities. If it would escalate to the public, if it would try to involve relatives in lies, if it would get to his work. On the third day, I found a message in my work email. Someone sent mean comments about my competence, insinuating that I had gotten my job by favors, details that only those who probed my past would know. My breath became short. I had a feeling of invasion that vibrated all over my body. Marcus held my hand that night and said, "Let's react calmly with evidence." We set up folders with documents, printed the tickets, organized the camera recording in several backups. There was something liberating about turning fear into organization. At the same time, I found myself thinking about what I really wanted. Not to destroy Dolores, not to accelerate her hatred to the point of violence, but to close the cycle she insisted on keeping open, a cycle of humiliation that cost me nights of sleep and forced smiles. I decided that I would do what I have always done. I would respond with class. If she wanted war, she would not give him a show. If I wanted a scene, I would offer articulate silence and consequences. I agreed with Marcus on a simple plan. When the situation escalated again, we would calmly expose the evidence to the family, letting the truth speak louder than the drama. In theme and time, we would strengthen our network, friends, neighbors, colleagues, people who knew our truth and who, through small actions, could neutralize rumors. It was a strategy that cost patience, but it promised something more valuable than quick revenge: dignity preserved. That week, I slept with the photos in a locked drawer, not out of fear of what they showed, but as a reminder of the price I was paying for choosing to live with someone I loved to the point of protecting. I knew that Dolores was still planning moves, but I also knew that this time the house had firm walls and that I would no longer be just the woman who collects her clothes in the backyard. Marcus left the situation in the right hands. We recorded everything, gave the evidence to the closest family, talked to neighbors and her boss, not to humiliate, but to show that there was a pattern and that this was not a couple crisis. It was persecution. When the conversation came to light, the effect was immediate. People who previously thought that mothers-in-law fight began to understand that it went beyond any normality. Uncles who had always avoided meddling asked for calm and, calmly, began to position themselves. I saw faces change, including some cousins who used to smile out of politeness. Unbelief has taken the place of laughter. Dolores tried to turn thetables with visitors and dramatic phone calls, spreading versions and garbled news, but every lie she had come up against the evidence we had organized. The recording showed the cruel laughter. The photos showed the pieces being thrown. The notes revealed the intention to expose my life. In the end, the truth worked like a lamp in a dark room. It cleared everything. Over time, her visits decreased. People she used to summon to form walls around her words did not want to expose themselves to vidence. Marcus, who had always preferred to avoid confrontation, stood by me with a firmness that I had never seen before, not out of a need to prove anything to me, but because for the first time, he clearly chose to protect our space without guilt. I saw in his eyes a respect that came not only from forgiveness for past mistakes, but from admiration for maintaining calm and dignity when he needed it most. Dolores tried to act in other ways. She sent letters, talked to older neighbors, tried to revive memories that favored her. Nothing worked. Gradually, she isolated herself, occupying her own anger as her only company. One day, I received a simple and dry warning through the door. She had decided to move to another city, claiming, "I need silence to think." Noon forced anything. It was not a triumphant scene. It was the natural denouement of those who insist on controlling everything until there is nothing left to control. The home has returned to being a place of routine, not anxiety. I started to sleep without the weight of other people's gaze, and small everyday things, a hot cup of coffee, the choice of clothes without fear of comments, started to have flavor again. I did not celebrate with loud words. There was little to celebrate in humiliating the other. Instead, I chose to keep the feeling of peace as a simple gift, grounded in the right to exist without being punished for it. I learned that resistance has multiple forms. There is the resistance that screams, and the resistance that organizes, that gathers evidence and asks for justice, that recovers its own history without spectacularizing the pain. And I had learned to do this without losing my cool, without igniting ties that could one day be remade with truth. When, a few months later, I found a piece of my favorite sweater tucked away in the drawer, clean, unmarked, I smiled quietly. It was not revenge, it was restoration. Dolores occupied one chapter of our history, and we wrote the next stone in peace. Marcus and I go on with the life we have chosen, with more care, with clear limits, with more voice. And sometimes, when someone asks me what I did, I answer simply, "I didn't do a show. I kept myself whole."